The van screeched to a halt in front of the veterinary clinic, its headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The man rushed inside, cradling the flimsy box in his arms. The staff at the desk rose instantly, startled by the sight. 4 trembling kittens, their tiny bodies soaked and weak, barely clinging to life. But what left them even more astonished was the figure that followed. Dripping water across the tile floor, the German shepherd padded in, his massive frame looming protectively behind the man. His eyes never left the kittens. Every step was measured, as if he feared someone might take them away. The team hurried into action. Warm towels, heating pads, and tiny bottles of milk were brought out. Each kitten was carefully dried, nestled into soft blankets, and fed drop by drop. Their frail cries softened as warmth returned to their bodies. Yet through it all, the shepherd remained fixed at their side, lowering himself to the floor, curling his damp frame around the nest they made for the kittens. He did not close his eyes, even when exhaustion tugged at him. He stayed watchful, guarding them in this new place as faithfully as he had in the storm. By morning, the kittens stirred with new strength, batting their paws at one another in weak play. The clinic staff whispered in awe, shaking their heads. "He kept them alive," one nurse murmured. Another smiled through tears. "He's their guardian angel." And the name stuck, for there was no truer description of the dog who had chosen to endure the storm so others could see the sun again. The rain poured relentlessly that night, hammering rooftops and turning the narrow alley into streams of muddy water. Trash bins overflowed, paper scraps swirled in the current, and the smell of damp decay clung to the air. But in the middle of that forgotten place stood a lone figure, a German shepherd, his once proud coat plastered tight against his body, every strand heavy with water. He looked like a soldier in exile, abandoned to the storm, yet refusing to surrender. His paws were half submerged in cold puddles, his legs trembling under the weight of exhaustion, but his stance was steady, unwavering. He wasn't seeking shelter, wasn't searching for food. His eyes, sharp and burning with purpose, scanned the darkness. His ears twitched at every echo, a car door slamming, a bottle rolling, thunder cracking. Behind him sat a battered cardboard box, edges collapsing under the downpour, the soggy lids sagging inward. With every gust of wind, the shepherd shifted, pressing his body closer, shielding it like a fortress. Whatever was inside wasn't just important to him, it was his mission, his duty, the reason he defied the storm. His body bore the weight of loyalty, and his silence spoke louder than any bark. "Nothing will touch what I protect." A lone figure appeared at the end of the alley, a passerby, rushing home with his umbrella tilted against the whipping wind. He might have ignored the drenched corner entirely, if not for the unsettling sight of a dog standing rigid in the storm. The man slowed, confusion etched across his face. Why would any animal remain out in such punishing rain, when even strays usually fled beneath porches or into shop doorways for shelter? Curiosity tugged at him, and with cautious steps, he approached. As he neared, the image grew clearer. The German shepherd's entire body shook violently, water dripping from his muzzle, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. But there was something more than misery in his posture. It was defiance. The dog did not seek escape. His stance was deliberate, as though his own pain mattered little compared to what lay behind him. The man took another tentative step forward, umbrella swaying. At once, a low growl rumbled from the shepherd's chest, deep and guttural, a sound born not of fear but of warning. His eyes flashed with an untamed light, muscles coiled despite the weakness that trembled through his frame. He was exhausted, near his limit, yet he stood like a wall. It became clear to the man that this was no ordinary stray searching for scraps of kindness. This was a guardian, a sentinel, prepared to drive back any stranger, any threat, no matter the cost. Whatever he protected, he was ready to fight for it in the middle of that merciless storm. A jagged streak of lightning split the sky, flooding the alley with a sudden burst of white light. In that fleeting instant, the man's eyes fell to the collapsing box the shepherd guarded so fiercely. Driven by both fear and wonder, he bent closer, pushing the dripping flap aside. His breath froze in his throat. Inside, barely visible against the damp cardboard, were 4 tiny lives, kittens, so fragile they looked as though the storm itself could wash them away. Their eyes were barely open, their fur matted into spiky clumps, and their frail bodies trembled with each weak cry for warmth. The man's heart tightened at the sight. These were creatures not meant to survive the night alone. Before he could reach a hand forward, the German shepherd lowered his head into the box. His massive frame, built for strength and power, moved with astonishing tenderness. With careful licks, he brushed the rain from the kittens' faces, nudging them closer together so their tiny bodies shared warmth. It was as if he whispered to them through every touch, "You are not alone. I am here." The contrast was staggering. A predator by nature, now cradling fragile newborns with a gentleness that seemed almost sacred. His chest expanded and contracted with heavy breaths, but he refused to shift away, positioning himself so his soaked body served as a wall against the biting wind. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. His loyalty, his love, reached far beyond the boundaries of species. He had claimed them as his own, and he would not let the storm, nor hunger, nor man, take them from his care. The man lowered himself slowly to the ground, careful not to startle the soaked guardian before him. Rain pattered hard against his umbrella as he whispered, his voice soft and low, almost pleading. "It's okay, boy. I'll help. I promise." His words were carried away by the storm, yet the shepherd's ears flicked, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Those eyes, sharp, amber, and unyielding, spoke more loudly than any bark could. They warned that trust was not something he handed to strangers. His muscles tensed, his body angled protectively toward the fragile box, ready to lunge if a hand came too close. So the man did not force it. He set a piece of food gently on the wet ground, backing away to give the shepherd space. At first, the dog only growled, ignoring the offering. Time dragged on, the rain unrelenting, but the man returned again and again, each time leaving food, each time keeping his distance. Hours passed this way, a quiet battle of wills, one man's patience against one dog's devotion. At last, weakness betrayed the shepherd. His ribs showed beneath his drenched coat, his legs shook with fatigue, and hunger gnawed at him. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he stepped toward the food. But before he touched it, he turned back to the box, nudging each tiny kitten closer to one another, making sure they were pressed into a tight ball of warmth. Only when they were safe and still did he lower his head to eat. Even in that moment of desperation, his loyalty was absolute. His own survival was secondary. The little lives in the box came first. The storm grew fiercer as night deepened, sheets of rain slashing across the alley, the wind howling like some unseen beast. The man, watching the shivering dog and the fragile box, felt his chest ache with helplessness. He couldn't walk away, not now, not after witnessing the devotion in those weary eyes. Disappearing briefly, he returned with something dry, a thick, woolen blanket he had fetched from his car. Kneeling carefully, he spread it out just beside the soggy box, close enough for the shepherd to see, but not so close as to provoke his suspicion. For a long moment, the German shepherd only stared, his body tense, unsure of this new object. Then slowly he approached. The man held his breath as the great dog lowered his muzzle, teeth fastening gently into the fabric. What he did next stunned the man completely. Instead of curling into it for his own warmth, the shepherd dragged the heavy blanket closer to the box, his movements deliberate, determined. With painstaking care, he tugged one corner inside and nosed it over the kittens, tucking their tiny, trembling bodies beneath its shelter. The man's throat tightened as he watched. In the midst of his own suffering, the dog had chosen to comfort the helpless lives entrusted to him. He could have saved himself, taken the dry haven, but instead he offered it to them, asking nothing in return. In that single, selfless act, every doubt shattered. This was not mere instinct. This was sacrifice. This was love. The German Shepherd had willingly embraced the storm so the kittens could dream in warmth and safety. And the man knew then, he was not looking at a stray. He was looking at a guardian angel cloaked in fur. The rain showed no mercy, and the box was nearly falling apart, its sides caving under the water's weight. The man knew if he waited any longer, the kittens might not survive the night. Summoning courage, he crouched low and, with the gentlest touch he could manage, slid his hands beneath the collapsing cardboard. The shepherd immediately erupted into frantic barking, teeth bared, his whole body surging forward in panic. To him, the stranger was stealing the very lives he had sworn to protect. But then, something changed. The man did not clutch the box tightly or rush away. Instead, he moved slowly, carefully, lifting it as though it contained treasures more fragile than glass. He opened the van door and set it inside on a waiting towel, spreading the fabric tenderly beneath the shivering kittens. They mewed softly, and the shepherd froze mid-bark, his ears flicking forward. His eyes darted from the man's hands to the kittens, watching as each tiny body was arranged with deliberate care. A beat of hesitation hung in the air. Then, the shepherd stepped closer, his chest still heaving with suspicion, but the fire in his growl had dimmed. The man backed away slightly, leaving space. Slowly, with heavy paws and dripping fur, the German shepherd climbed into the van. He lowered himself beside the box, pressing close until his warmth touched the tiny bundle of life he had sworn to guard. His gaze never wavered from them, not even for a second. In that moment, it was clear, this was no coincidence. Somewhere, somehow, he had promised their mother, a vow carved in his soul, that he would guard them to the very end. And nothing, not even his own suffering, could make him break it. Weeks passed, and the bitter memory of that storm faded into something brighter. The kittens, once fragile and silent, now tumbled across the floors of their new foster home, chasing strings, wrestling clumsily, their tiny paws batting at each other in bursts of joy. Their fur had grown soft and glossy, their eyes wide with curiosity at every corner of the house. And wherever they went, every chase, every nap, every exploration, a shadow moved with them. The German shepherd. He followed them not as a warden, but as a guardian, every step heavy with quiet devotion. When they darted under the couch, he laid his head down, waiting patiently. When they climbed too high, he paced beneath, ready to catch them. At night, when they curled into one another, he curled around them too, forming a circle of warmth that no storm could ever break. The man who had taken them in often watched this unlikely family with a swelling heart. He knew he could never separate them. The bond was unshakable, forged in rain and tested by suffering. So he adopted them all together, smiling as he whispered, "Some bonds aren't made by blood. They're made by love." And so it was. From that night onward, the German shepherd was no longer just a stray left behind in the storm. He had a home, a family. And the kittens he once guarded now guarded him in return, curling against his chest, their purrs a promise that he would never face the world alone again.